In the village of Umudim, the people had a strange way of life. When someone died, they danced, sang, and feasted for days. Drummers beat their talking drums, and women dressed in bright wrappers, ululating in joy. The air smelled of jollof rice, roasted meat, and palm wine. But when a baby was born, the village fell silent. Doors shut, windows closed, and whispers spread like the harmattan wind. The mother was left alone, trembling, as if she had done something wrong. No one visited, no one celebrated. It was a rule as old as time. A boy named Obinna did not understand this rule. He was 10 years old, with bright eyes full of curiosity. Mama, he asked one evening, why do we dance when someone dies, but hide when a baby is born? His mother, Mama Nkechi, looked around fearfully before whispering, because long ago, a baby brought the curse upon us. Since then, we have feared births. Obinna frowned. What curse? But Mama Nkechi shook her head. Do not ask, my son. It is not our place to question the ways of our ancestors. That week, a man named Papa Okafor died. The village exploded in celebration. Women clapped their hands, men pounded their drums, and elders poured libations on the ground. Thanking the gods, the villagers carried Papa Okafor's body through the streets, singing songs of his life. Children ran behind the procession, laughing. Obinna watched in confusion. If death was such a happy thing, why did people cry when it took someone they loved? And why did they fear the tiny cries of a newborn child? It made no sense, but no one dared to speak about it. 2 days later, a baby was born to Ifoma. The moment the first cry rang out, the village changed. Doors slammed shut, curtains were drawn, and people scurried into their homes like rats fleeing a predator. The air grew heavy with silence. No songs were sung, no drums were played. Ifoma sat alone in her hut, cradling her daughter, her eyes filled with worry. Outside, the village watched in fear, waiting to see if the curse would return. No one dared step forward, not even to bring food to the new mother. Obinna could not understand. He sneaked to Ifoma's hut and peered through the window. The baby girl was tiny, wrapped in soft clothes, her small fingers grasping at the air. She was beautiful. Why are they afraid of her? He asked himself. Carefully, he knocked on the door and stepped inside. Ifoma gasped. Obinna, what are you doing here? He smiled. I came to see the baby. She is not a curse. She is just like me, just like you. Tears welled up in Mama Ifoma's eyes, but she did not speak. That night, Obinna ran to the oldest man in the village, Elder Kano. The elder was as old as the great baobab tree, his beard white as the morning mist. Elder Kano, Obinna said, why do we fear birds? The old man sighed and motioned for Obinna to sit. Long ago, he began, a child was born with strange eyes. The moment he took his first breath, sickness spread. Cows died, rivers dried up, and people fell ill. The villagers believed the child brought the curse. Since then, we have feared all births lest the curse return. Obinna frowned. But that was long ago. The curse is gone. Why are we still afraid? Elder Kanu chuckled, but there was sadness in his eyes. Fear is a powerful thing, my son. It stays even when the danger is gone. The people believe that if they do not welcome birth, the curse will stay away. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time for change. Obina's heart pounded with hope. And then let us change it. The elder shook his head. It is not easy. The people will not listen. They fear what they do not understand. Obinna did not give up. The next morning, he gathered his friends. Nana and Chiamaka. We must show the village that babies are not a curse, he said. But how? Chiamaka asked. Obinna grinned. We will celebrate the baby, just like they celebrate funerals. The children's eyes widened. But the elders will be angry, Nana whispered. Let them be, Obinna said. Fear cannot live forever. Together they collected flowers, fruit and small gifts. As the village slept, they placed them at Mama Ifoma's door, a quiet sign of welcome. When Mama Ifoma woke up, she gasped. The ground outside her hut was covered with gifts. She clutched her baby tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time she felt hope. The whispers began. Who did this? The villagers asked. Some were angry, others were curious. It was the children, Elder Kanu finally said, his voice filled with amusement. They are not bound by old fears. The villagers murmured, unsure of what to do. Some still clung to their fear, but others began to wonder, had they been wrong all this time? That night, Obinna and his friends lit a small fire in the village square. They began to sing softly at first, and then louder. The sound of their voices echoed through the village, waking the people from their sleep. One by one the villagers emerged, drawn to the music. Elder Kanu stepped forward. What is this? He asked. His voice kind. Obinna stood tall. A celebration, he said, for the baby. The crowd gasped. Some clutched their chests in fear, but others listened. The old ways were cracking, like the dry earth before the first rain. This is madness, Elder Wonsu, the second oldest man, shouted. Do you want to bring the curse upon us? Obinna met his eyes fearlessly. What curse, Elder? The sickness came long ago, but it has not come again. How do we know it was truly the baby? Maybe it was something else. Maybe we have been afraid for no reason. The village held its breath. Could it be true? Had they feared nothing for generations? A long silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then slowly, Elder Kanu nodded. Perhaps the boy is right. The people murmured, uncertain. Change was not easy. Fear had lived in their hearts for too long. But then something happened. A woman, Mama Uchenna, stepped forward. She walked to Mama Ifoma's hut and knocked. May I see the baby? She asked. Mama Ifoma's eyes filled with tears. Yes. She placed the baby in Mama Uchenna's arms. The woman gasped. The baby cooed, tiny fingers wrapping around hers. She laughed. She is beautiful. One by one, the villagers followed. They touched the baby's hands, whispered soft words, and for the first time they smiled. The next day, the village held its first ever birth festival. They cooked, danced, and played drums. People sang, Life is a blessing, not a curse. The old fear had cracked like a broken pot spilling away into dust. Even Elder Wonsu, though still grumbling, could not deny what he saw. Perhaps, he said, we were wrong all along. And so the village of Umudin changed. They still honored the dead, but now they also welcomed life. Babies were no longer feared. And it all began with a boy who dared to ask why. The birth festival lasted all day and into the night. The villagers, once fearful, danced in the moonlight. Drummers beat their drums in a steady rhythm, and flutes filled the air with sweet melodies. Mothers held their babies close, their eyes shining with happiness. This is how it should have always been, Mama Ifoma whispered, rocking her baby gently. Obinna stood in the crowd, his heart pounding with joy. He had done something no one else had dared to do. He had changed the village's heart. But he knew that not everyone had accepted the change. Elder Wonsu still sat on his wooden stool, his arms crossed. He did not want to dance. He did not smile. His eyes were dark with worry. We have broken the old ways, he muttered. What if the curse returns? Obinna saw him and walked over. Elder, he said boldly, if the curse does not come, will you believe that we were wrong to fear? The old man's lips pressed into a thin line. Time will tell, he said. If nothing bad happens, I will know you were right. But in his heart, doubt still remained. The days passed and no curse came. The rivers did not dry, the cows did not die. No sickness spread through the village. Instead, something unexpected happened. People became happier. Mothers no longer feared their pregnancies. Fathers no longer looked away when their children were born. The village, once heavy with fear, began to feel lighter. People walked with their heads held high. They no longer hid when a baby cried in the night. Instead, they smiled, knowing that new life meant new hope. Even the birds seemed to sing louder, as if celebrating the change. But then, on a cold evening, something terrible happened. A young boy named Ikenna fell ill. His body burned with fever, and his breath came in ragged gasps. The villagers panicked. It is the curse, they cried. We have welcomed birth and now death is coming for us. Fear spread like wildfire. Elder Wonsu stood tall in the village square. I warned you, he shouted. We have angered the spirits. The sickness has returned because we abandoned the ways of our ancestors. People clutched their chests in terror. The joy from the birth festival disappeared in an instant. Obinna refused to believe it. He ran to Ikenna's hut and found Mama Uchenna weeping. He is not cursed, Obinna said firmly. He is sick and that is all. We must help him, not fear him. He turned to Elder Kanu, who stood watching silently. Elder, there must be a way to save him. The old man stroked his beard. There is, he said. Long ago, before we feared birds, we had healers. They knew the ways of the land, but we have forgotten them. Obinna clenched his fist. Then we must remember, who was the last healer? A hushed silence fell over the crowd. Finally, an old woman stepped forward. Her back was bent with age, and her face was lined like the bark of an ancient tree. I was once a healer, she said softly, before fear took hold. The villagers gasped. Mama Ekene, someone whispered, we thought you were just an old storyteller. The woman chuckled. Stories hold truth, she said, and the truth is I can heal the boy. Elder Wonsu scoffed. It is too late. The curse will take him. But Obinna stepped forward. Let her try, he pleaded. With the villagers watching, Mama Ekene entered Ikenna's hut. She placed a cool cloth on his forehead, boiled healing herbs, and whispered words of strength into his ear. The night was long and the people waited anxiously outside. Some still believed the curse had returned, others hoped Obinna was right. As the first light of dawn touched the village, Mama Ekene stepped out. She raised her hands. The boy will live, she announced. A great sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Ikenna was not cursed. He was simply sick and now he was healing. The village erupted in cheers. Mothers hugged their children, fathers shook hands. The fear that had gripped their hearts loosened. Elder Wonsu sat in stunned silence. He had been so sure that the curse was real. But now, with the proof before him, doubts filled his mind. Had they truly feared for nothing all these years? Had they celebrated funerals and hidden from births because of a mistake? He looked at Obinna, the boy who had dared to question what no one else had. Perhaps, Elder Wonsu muttered, we have been too blind for too long. That night, the villagers gathered in the square once more. The drums returned and the flutes played, and laughter filled the air. But this time, the celebration was not for death, it was for life. Mama Ifoma held her baby high in the air, and the people cheered. From now on, Elder Kanu announced, we will welcome life as we do death. No longer will we fear birth. No longer will we hide when a child is born. The people clapped and tears streamed down the faces of the older villagers. A new era had begun. Days turned into weeks and the village changed. Mothers proudly named their newborns. Fathers carved cradles for their children. When a baby cried, people smiled instead of shuddering in fear. The darkness that had once loomed over Umudim lifted, replaced by warmth and joy. Children ran through the streets, their laughter echoing in the air. The elders sat under the great tree, telling stories of how the village had changed. And at the heart of it all, it was Obinna, the boy who had dared to bring light into the shadows. One day, another baby was born. This time, no doors were shut, no windows were covered. Instead, the villagers gathered at the house, bringing gifts, singing songs, and welcoming the child into the world. Even Elder Wonsu arrived, his eyes filled with emotions. He knelt beside the mother and gently touched the baby's tiny fingers. I was wrong, he admitted. Fear kept us blind for too long. Obinna watched, his heart swelling with pride. The village had truly changed. They had learned that fear was a prison and love was the key to freedom. Years passed and Obinna grew into a wise man. He sat beneath the great tree, telling his own children and grandchildren the story of the village that once feared birds. Fear, he said, is like a shadow. It only exists when there is no light. The children listened, eyes wide. And you brought the light? A little girl asked. Obinna chuckled. No, my dear. We all did. And so, the village of Umudim became known far and wide as the village that had conquered its fear. Life and death were honored and love replaced fear forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, please give this video a thumbs up. It will help grow my small YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet to my YouTube channel, do well to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post more interesting content like this. If you haven't gone through my page yet, do well to go through my page. I have other interesting content as well. Do well to view and leave a comment in this video. Let me know your thoughts about this story. See you guys in my next video. Bye.